His name was Thomas, and his world was forged from flour and fire. Deep in the humming belly of the greatest ship ever built, far from the gilded decks and the kiss of the salt-laced wind, he practiced a quiet magic. He coaxed life from simple things. His hands, though still young, were old with the baker's trade, calloused and knowing. They understood the patient rhythm of kneading dough, the silent, blossoming language of yeast and water. He was a baker's assistant, a ghost in the third-class galley of the RMS Titanic. His dream was not of gold piled high on the streets of America, but something far simpler, and to him, far richer. He dreamt of a small shop with a bright blue door on a quiet Southampton street. May's Marvels, he'd call it. The window would be filled not with grand cakes, but with honest, golden loaves. The smell of baking bread, a scent he believed was the purest form of hope, would spill out onto the cobblestones, a welcome to all. Each morning, long before the sun had touched the vast Atlantic, he was at his post. The great ovens breathed a dry, intense heat, a dragon's breath in the iron heart of the ship. He felt the colossal vessel tremble and sway beneath his feet, a gentle giant cradling thousands of souls, carrying him toward his new life. He had watched the mountains of supplies being hoisted aboard in Southampton, crates of shimmering oranges, barrels of fine flour that dusted the air like a pale fog, endless rows of canned goods, meats, and glistening jars of preserves. The ship's main pantries were like a king's treasury, sealed and guarded, locked away in the cold lower levels. A promise of endless feasts for the wealthy, a distant, unbelievable rumor for those traveling in steerage. But Thomas had his own small kingdom, a world of rising dough and the sharp, satisfying crack of a perfect crust under his blade. He would watch the families crowd the third-class dining hall, their faces etched with the fatigue of the old world and the fragile hope for the new. And when he saw them break his bread, a quiet, profound joy filled him. He was giving them more than food. He was giving them a moment of warmth, a taste of a home they had left behind, or one they had yet to find. There was a young girl with eyes the color of the deep ocean, often sitting alone with her mother. Elara, he heard her mother call her. She would sketch in a small, worn notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. She reminded him of his sister and of his own quiet, careful dreams. On the second day, he slipped an extra roll, still steaming, onto her tray. She looked up, her serious expression melting into a brief, brilliant smile. It became their silent ritual. A small conspiracy of kindness enacted in the ship's thrumming heart. The ship was a world of rigid, uncrossable lines, first class, second, third. But bread, he thought as he dusted his hands, bread should be for everyone. It was the great equalizer. Then came the sound, a low, tearing shudder that was not of the engines, a deep, resonant wound opening in the steel, a sound that traveled from the deep bones of the ship and settled like ice in his own. The gentle rhythm was broken forever. The floor tilted sharply, sending a rack of cooling loaves crashing to the tiles. Then came the screams, a symphony of terror rising from all corners of the ship, rising faster than the freezing water. The lights flickered, died, then flared again, casting long, monstrous shadows that danced with the tilt of the deck. Chaos was a cold, sharp blade, cutting through all order and station. Officers shouted commands that were swallowed by the noise. Watertight doors boomed shut. Gates were locked. The rigid lines of the ship became the iron bars of a cage. Thomas ran, but his instincts did not pull him up toward the promise of a lifeboat. His feet, as if with a mind of their own, carried him back to the heat of his ovens, now growing unnervingly cold. His world was ending. The floor slanted so violently, it was like climbing a hill. And in the face of incomprehensible oblivion, he did the only thing that made sense to him. He clung to his purpose. He went back for the bread. He found his head baker, a stout man now pale with fear, and a young scullery maid who was praying in whispers. In their eyes, Thomas saw his own desperate resolve mirrored. No words were needed. Together, they forced the lock on their small working pantry. Not the grand sealed larders of first class, but their own humble store. They grabbed the loaves they had baked just hours before. The beautiful, perfect loaves meant for a tomorrow that would never come. They pushed their way to the blocked corridors where the people of third class were trapped, their faces pressed against the cold steel gates. He saw Elara, her small face streaked with tears, clutching her mother's skirt. Her mother held her, whispering words that were lost in the groan of the dying ship. Thomas reached through the bars. He pressed a warm, soft loaf into the mother's trembling hands. He didn't say a word. His flour-dusted fingers brushed against hers for a fleeting, impossible second. It was not a solution. It was not a rescue. It was just bread. A final, simple offering of warmth against the encroaching dark. It was a piece of his dream. The bakery with the blue door, given away in the last moments of his life. Thomas May's name was etched onto a long, cold list of the lost. When the world grieved the Titanic, it spoke of the opulence, of the grand staircase where couples had danced, of the diamonds and the millionaires swallowed by the sea. Decades later, when robotic explorers pierced the crushing blackness of the abyss, they marveled at what remained. They glided through the ship's silent, ghostly halls and found the sealed pantries undisturbed. Catacombs of cuisine, where jars of fruits and preserves stood in neat, patient rows, their colors still vibrant. Bottles of wine and champagne sleeping in the silt. A ghostly feast that no one ever ate, left to slowly, inexorably decay in the timeless dark, a monument to abundance, locked away from the hungry and the cold. But Thomas's true legacy was not in those cold, sealed rooms. It was in the echo of a small, desperate act of grace. It lived in the memory of an old woman named Elara, who would tell her grandchildren of the night the stars fell into the sea. Her memory of the chaos was a blur, a nightmare of noise and fear. But one detail remained sharp and clear through all the years. The image of a young baker with flour on his cheek, his eyes kind, and the sudden, impossible warmth of a fresh loaf of bread placed in her mother's hands. The bread was gone in an instant, but the feeling of it, the simple, profound humanity of that gift, became the anchor of her survival story. It was a flicker of light in an ocean of darkness. The great ship went down with enough food to feed an army, sealed away in its deep, frozen heart. It sits there still, a sunken treasure of what could have been. We look at the ghostly images of those pantries, and we see a lesson written in rust and decay. That true sustenance is not what is hoarded behind locked doors. It is not found in preserved jars or vintage wines. It is in the single loaf, given freely when all is being lost. It is in the warmth shared between two hands in a final, fading moment. The most profound treasures are not the ones we keep for ourselves, but the small acts of kindness we leave behind to echo through time.